You know that story you tell yourself about who you are, all those little traits and quirks that make you, well, you? We all have one. But what if that story, the very foundation of your identity, isn't nearly as set in stone as you think it is? That's exactly what we're going to dive into together.
I mean, how many times have you said this? Or something like, oh, that's just my personality. Or I've always been this way, right? We say it like it's a fundamental law of physics, like stating our own height or eye color. It just feels like a fact.
And that's the thing, isn't it? They feel 100% true. It feels like it comes from the very core of our being. But have you ever really truly stopped to ask yourself, wait a minute, where did this part of me actually come from? We almost never do.
So here's the big question for our lesson today. What if that identity you know so well isn't some permanent fixture? What if it's actually something that was built piece by piece, often without you even realizing it? Let's take a look at the blueprint.
Okay, so if our identity is something that's built, then how on earth does that happen? Well, it's not as mysterious as it sounds. In fact, there's a pretty clear process that turns a simple experience into what we end up calling our personality.
It all starts with a single moment in time. In that moment, you have a reaction, a response. Now, if that response works for you, maybe it keeps you safe, maybe it gets you some praise, you're probably gonna do it again and again. And with enough repetition, that response becomes totally automatic. And then, finally, that automatic habit gets named. We stop seeing it as something we do, and we start calling it who we are.
And it's so important to remember that these behaviors were never random. They had a job to do. They were smart strategies that at some point in your life protected you, helped you cope with something difficult, or kept you feeling connected to the people around you. They were your original survival kit.
And this right here, this is the turning point. When a behavior gets so practiced that you do it without a second thought, it doesn't feel like a choice anymore, does it? It just feels natural. It feels like you, and your mind completely forgets it was ever just a strategy to begin with.
So this all leads us to what we can call the great mistake. It's this tiny little mental slip, but it's incredibly powerful, and it's what keeps us locked into these old patterns. Getting a handle on this mistake is everything.
So here's the mistake, plain and simple. We take something we do, a behavior, a pattern, a reaction, and we magically transform it into who we are. An action becomes an identity. A reaction becomes a truth. A learned pattern becomes a permanent personality trait. And that right there is the illusion.
Let's make this really concrete. Do any of these sound familiar? Maybe you're the person who just shuts down in an argument. That could have started as a way to keep the peace when you were a kid. Or maybe you over-explain every little thing because you learned that was the only way to feel heard. Or maybe you're an overgiver, a habit she might have picked up to feel valuable and needed.
You see? Every single one of those examples follows that exact same process we talked about. It wasn't some trait you were born with, it was a skill you learned, a behavior you practiced over and over, and then, somewhere along the way, you accidentally mistook it for your real self.
So why are we spending all this time on this distinction? Why does it matter so much? Because, and this is the most important part, understanding the difference between what you do and who you are is the absolute key that unlocks the door to change.
Just think about it. If you believe something is just your identity, it feels like a life sentence, right? It's permanent. It's unchangeable. You feel stuck. But the moment you can see it as a learned behavior, everything changes. Suddenly, it's not permanent. It can be understood, it can be questioned, and it can be changed. All of a sudden, you have a choice.
I want you to really hear this. You are not your knee-jerk reactions. You are not your collection of coping strategies. You are not the patterns you run on autopilot. Those are just things you learn to do to get by. They are not the core essence of who you are.
And this brings us to the most empowering part of this entire lesson. Once we can finally separate who we are from what we've learned to do, we can actually start to see the person who's been there all along, the person who has the power to learn something new.
Just let that sink in for a second. You aren't the pattern. You are the one who learned the pattern. You are the conscious, aware person who adopted that strategy in the first place. And that simple shift puts all the power right back in your hands.
And let's be really clear about something. This is not about erasing your personality or becoming some kind of blank slate. It's actually the opposite. It's about carefully peeling away all those layers of learned behavior to finally reveal the authentic, true self that's been waiting underneath. So, I'm going to leave you with a question to carry with you. If that trait you always thought was just how you are is actually something you have been doing,
a pattern you've been running, what becomes possible for you now? What could you choose to do next? That, right there, is where your real journey begins.